Hi everyone, my name is Misty Cox, and this is my final evaluation project. My evaluation centered on the moral recognition therapy curriculum used at my internship agency. My field practicum site is called The Haven, and it's located in Salt Lake City, Utah. They were founded in 1969, and they are a nonprofit agency specializing in addiction recovery, addiction treatment services across the continuum of care. Their mission is to provide compassionate and comprehensive substance use disorder treatment to diverse individuals, hopefully empowering them to break free from the cycle of substance use and regain some kind of control over their lives. Their treatment program provides residential, intensive outpatient, and sober living services to men and women over the age of 18. So, although the clients come from a variety of different backgrounds and circumstances, most of them are court ordered to be in treatment. So, our problem identification and assessment. A large portion of those who receive services at the Haven are, or as I mentioned, have been justice involved, and their participation is court ordered. Most are considered low income, and that's evidenced by Medicaid being our primary insurer, although we do accept private insurance as well. The MRT curriculum, or the moral recognition therapy, is used in a group setting and is facilitated by a trained clinician once a week. In the United States, there's a strong connection between individuals involved in the criminal justice system and those with substance use disorders. In fact, approximately 65% of the prison population also have a substance use disorder. So currently, the Haven does not have data to suggest that using MRT increases moral reasoning capacity. And so that is why I decided to do my evaluation on the curriculum, was to provide some data to support its use. So what is moral recognition therapy? So MRT is a cognitive behavioral treatment program for those involved in the criminal justice system with substance use disorders. So moral refers to moral reasoning, and that's based on Kohlberg's levels of cognitive reasoning. And recognition comes from the psychological terms cognitive and connotation that both refer to conscious decisions. MRT is designed to enhance moral reasoning, better decision making, and improve pro-social behaviors. It works by guiding clients through structured reflection, peer feedback, and progressive moral reasoning steps. The stages align similarly and focus on, similarly with Kohlberg's stages, and focus on addressing honesty and trust, as you can see on the graphic here at the bottom. So MRT steps 1 and 2 focus on honesty and trust, moving up the chain, long-term goals and identity, and maintaining positive change. So MRT is typically conducted in a therapeutic group setting with about 10 to 15 participants. And these are individuals that come to us and their probation officer or the court has required that they do and finish MRT, or clinicians who are working with clients recommend them to this group. Its sessions are facilitated by a trained clinician through a series of workbook lessons. The MRT curriculum has a rolling structure with level advancement and pace dictated by the individual. So that just means that we meet in this group once a week, but each person is at a different stage in their MRT curriculum. So they present the stage that they're on to the group, they receive peer feedback, and as a group, it's decided whether or not that individual can advance another step or if they need to redo the current step that they're at. MRT was already being run at the Haven for justice involved clients, and because there was no assessment strategy, it seemed like a great evaluation to do. As you can see also in the graphic here, I have included my logic model with inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So hopefully long-term outcomes, there is successful completion of the MRT program by the participant. There's a reduction or a maintenance of abstinence from substances, and there's sustained behavioral changes over the long term. The evaluation design is a case level evaluation using an A-B single case design with a pre and post assessment. Phase A included administration of the Texas Christian University Criminal Thinking Scale, or for short TCU CTS3, to all who were participating in the MRT program at the Haven. Phase A was the start of the evaluation period rather than the start of the MRT curriculum itself, and that's because of that rolling structure. So wherever each participant was when they filled out the assessment, they noted that on the assessment what MRT step they were on. Phase B was the actual evaluation period, and it went from the end of April to the end of June. MRT participants attended groups regularly like they normally would have. There wasn't any disruption in delivery or curriculum. And then following that, the post-measurement phase included administering the TCU CTS3 again, and clients used their mother's birthday as their identifier because we don't have any record of their mother's birthday in their file. So it would be anonymous. Things would stay confidential. And they noted the MRT step that they were on again. So if they advanced, what step did they advance to, or did they stay the same? The primary outcome and goal in using MRT is a reduction in criminogenic thinking among MRT participants at the Haven. A reduction in scores between pre and post assessments indicates a restructuring of maladaptive thinking patterns, meaning there's an increase in moral reasoning capability. The measure is the TCU CTS3 is an existing standardized rapid assessment, self-reported, and it was developed by the Institute of Behavioral Research at Texas Christian University. It is a 36-item, again, self-report questionnaire that measures criminal thinking across 6 domains. 1, insensitivity to impact of crime, response disinhibition, justification, power orientation, grandiosity, and social desirability. Each item is rated on a 5-point Likert scale, from 1 being strongly disagree to 5 being strongly agree. Subscale scores, so the subscale for each one of the domains, are average and then rescaled from 10 to 50, with higher scores associated with increased criminogenic thinking. So we did want to see a reduction in those scores. I recognize these aren't the most commonly used assessment tools for moral reasoning or to measure moral reasoning. However, the more commonly used assessments were not free for non-commercial use, and scoring guides were professionally managed and inaccessible for something like this. In a validation study, the TCU CTS3 was found to have good psychometric properties and provided a reliable self-report assessment in a corrections setting. In a reevaluation of the TCU CTS3, an acceptable internal reliability and structural validity was also reported, so I felt comfortable using this assessment tool. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to administer, and I collected the data personally during the regularly scheduled MRT groups, both pre and post assessment. Participants were introduced to the evaluation and told that participation was voluntary and that their identities would remain anonymous and confidential. Baseline data in the first observation again took place at the end of April, and I finished and did the post assessment on June 30th. At the beginning of the assessment, in the evaluation window, there were 10 participants. When I finished the evaluation, there were only 3, and that was for a variety of reasons. Some of the clients had been discharged, some had graduated the program, and I didn't have time to have them take the assessment, etc. So the analysis approach was I compared scores from the pre and post test assessments per client. And although in an evaluation and research, more clients is better, it was nice actually to only have 3. So for each client, a change score for criminogenic thinking was calculated in addition to change scores within each domain. And you can see that on the chart listed here. So in the bottom right corner, you can see the MRT step advancement for client 1, client 2, and client 3. and it notes their step at the pre-assessment and their step at the post-assessment. The graph or the Excel spreadsheet portion on the left measures each client's pre and post-test scores based on each domain. So for example, client 1 on insensitivity to impact of crime scored a 20 on the pre-assessment and a 15 during the post-assessment. With a sample of only 3 clients, the analysis does have very little statistical power to detect significance, and I recognize that. The effect size actually is more meaningful, and it suggests a modest to practical reduction in criminogenic thinking, and we'll see that on the next slide here. So here we have a pretest composite. So this, I calculated the mean scores for the 3 clients combined. So the pretest composite mean was 23.34 with a standard deviation of 5.01. The post-test composite mean was 21.78 with a deviation of 3.17. So the composite score for the 3 clients combined decreased by 1.56 points. So the change is expected, and as MRT asserts that it does reduce criminogenic thinking and increase moral capability. So that was positive. The paired t-test produced a t-statistic of 1.28 with a two-tailed p-value of 0.32, which is not statistically significant. So the effect size falls in the small to medium range using Cohen's conventions. As I mentioned, the fact that there were only 3 clients, the statistical power here is really insignificant. So here we have, and I do recognize that these graphics may be smaller for you that are viewing it, but to fit it in slides and within time frame, I wanted to put them on one slide. So pause it here if you want to take a better look at each client individually. So for example, client 1 advanced 3 MRT steps. Their composite score dropped from 27.17 to 24.83. So that was great, and it was the largest single subscale improvement was found in power orientation, which dropped 8 points. So I don't know if you're able to see, but the domains are listed here across the bottom, and the blue represents their pre-assessment and the orange represents their post-assessment. So overall, what I found was that the more MRT steps advanced, that was associated with more reduction in criminogenic thinking. So this directly supports what we expected to find. So some conclusions and limitations. So conclusions, there was some mild to moderate change. Further, we did recognize that the further they advanced in MRT steps, the greater the change. And although the results are exploratory and descriptive rather than definitive, there's really no statistical significance that can be drawn with a sample of 3. Our limitations included that there wasn't a control group for comparison, and without one, it's not possible to see if MRT alone produced the desired outcomes, since MRT participants also attended other programming groups on other nights. And this is actually a criticism of MRT as well. It is often accompanied with some other therapeutic support, either in a treatment setting or there's some motivation, some forced motivation if they're incarcerated, and so there's always something that is connected to the MRT. There are correlating factors. So MRT in and of itself, does it reduce the criminogenic thinking and increase moral reasoning? There really hasn't been enough research on that in recent years to really determine that. The single site treatment setting combined with a small sample size, which was predominantly male, make generalizing the end results really unlikely. And the AB design falls into low to moderate level when it comes to rigor. And so a more in-depth evaluation would provide better data. Some implications. So the findings will be shared with the agency and my clinical supervisor, but due to the small sample size and the short time frame, the information really isn't sufficient to support any evidence-based decision making on its own for the Haven. However, the findings do support extended assessment to acquire a more robust evaluation, and it does suggest that continuing to track MRT and the step advancement alongside with the TCU CTS3 scores is a promising direction. So my final thoughts and lessons learned. The rolling program structure and time constraints posed real barriers that shaped what could and could not be measured. Attrition and turnover were harder to control than expected, and a longer evaluation window with more measurement points along the way would strengthen further evaluation. Additionally, a control group or comparison to the matched non-MRT cohort would also strengthen internal validity in a future evaluation. Recording the MRT step advancements did turn out to be one of the most useful data points, and I would build that into a future design again as well. Here are my references that I used for the slides and for my evaluation, and thank you for watching my presentation.